Welcome back to the Harry Report. My name is Harry, and today we're looking at the most popular football team by media market. Both NFL and CFL teams are shown here. This map was calculated using modified Google Trends data, which compiles results of what people search for on Google and related websites. Because people who like football may be Googling multiple teams, including ones that aren't their favorite, you can say this map is measuring the total interest in each team by region rather than a raw number of fans in each region. I think this gives a more robust and representative sample of fan interest rather than just using Facebook likes or maps of ticket sales you can find online. Those probably only show a subset of fans. I used the time period of 2018 through 2020. I wanted multiple years of data to smooth out any flukes and cut down on randomness, but I wanted it to be fairly current, so I settled on 3 years. However, the map would look about the same if I changed those cutoffs a bit. Teams who make it deep into the playoffs do tend to see spikes of interest in January, but not enough to significantly change this map. If you were to start fact checking me by querying Google Trends yourself, you may notice some differences with the map. First of all, the historical data on Google Trends changes a little bit each day. I use the Python package PyTrends to run this analysis, and from day to day I kept getting similar but slightly different results. So this is the average of 7 consecutive days of running the program. And although I did use Google's categories to make sure I wasn't getting results for non-football topics, I did notice that some data still just didn't look quite right. Some examples being the Arizona Cardinals, popular in the greater St. Louis area and a lot of the Midwest really, or the New York Jets being very popular in Manitoba. It's obvious that Google's algorithm is occasionally, but not often, confusing similarly named teams, in this case, baseball's St. Louis Cardinals and hockey's Winnipeg Jets. So I had to use my best mathematical judgment to correct these numbers. That's why I refer to this as modified Google Trends data. Now that I have those disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about the map. I used Tableau Public to compile this data, and I've included a link to the downloadable workbook in the description. Each region is color-coded by who the most popular team is in Google searches for that region. There are 34 colors that appear on the map. 31 of the 32 NFL teams have at least one region. Only the New York Jets don't have one, and they have to share their region with the Giants. I also included the Canadian Football League teams on the map because I wanted to see how they stacked up against the NFL teams in popularity. Unfortunately, Google Trends does not show media markets for Canada, so I had to look at the provinces and territories as a whole. 3 of the 9 CFL teams are the most popular in their province, and they're all located in Western Canada. Every NFL team generally has good control over their local area. One quasi-exception is the Florida teams, where the Patriots have more regions of control than any of the teams located in Florida. The Cowboys are the default team in a few areas that don't have their own teams, like Utah, some in South Carolina, Western Virginia. But their reach doesn't compare to what the Dodgers and the Yankees do on the MLB map. There's a lot more regional cohesion on this map. The flaw with this map, however, is that it doesn't show how popular the leader is in each region. Many of these areas that aren't close to a team have a so-called most popular team with just a 20% plurality. So we'll switch the color scheme to most popular percentage. So now you see the same map, but the shading indicates how popular the most popular team is. On one extreme, you see a dark red in Kansas City, where 65% of the NFL-related Google searches are about the Chiefs. On the other extreme, there are several metros where the most searched for team is only at 8%, including Gainesville, Tallahassee, Panama City, Birmingham, Louisville, Salt Lake City. An interesting contrast to the MLB map is what I call the churn of fans across the country. No team has more than 65% market share in any media market. Compare that to MLB, where 11 of the 30 teams have at least one market with that level of interest. Even the Dallas Cowboys, the most popular team in America, are just at 40% in Dallas. I think one major driver of this churn is the popularity of college football and how so many players already have devoted fans before they make their professional debuts. And since this map doesn't force all fans into just one bucket, people might be Googling their favorite teams and also their favorite players on other teams, and therefore contributing to several different buckets. In fact, unlike MLB, where this never happened, you often see in the NFL teams being popular in one area due to the impact of a single player, maybe his hometown or where he played college football. I'll make sure to point out every one that I notice when we go through each team. Finally, I'd also like to point out how long it takes for a new team to take hold in the market. The darkest colors on this map may signify the most loyal fan bases, but it may also just indicate the teams that have been around the longest. Here's a brief overview of the newest NFL teams, either by expansion or moving. You have the Jaguars in 1995, the Panthers in 1995, the Ravens in 1996, the Titans in 1998, the Texans in 2002. Now, all five of those teams are at or below 40% market share in their home markets, even though they've been around for 20 years or more. The LA teams and the Las Vegas Raiders are also extremely low, but they moved so recently that's more understandable. And to be clear, those aren't the only teams with market penetration below 40%, but it's pretty apparent that it takes decades for a new team to build up that fan base. So that's the overall map. I think this paints a fascinating picture of the interest in the different football teams by region. If you find anything surprising or noteworthy, let me know in the comments. Now let's go through each team individually. So we'll go to this drop-down menu and start selecting the teams. The Arizona Cardinals have very little interest outside the state of Arizona. They don't really have much in Arizona either, with only 21% in Phoenix. That's a pretty common trend across all sports for Arizona teams. While the Falcons are the most popular team across Georgia, they have pretty low market share there, and a pretty stark contrast to what you see in the Atlanta Braves, for example, who own all of the Southeast, including states like Alabama and even into Mississippi some. The Ravens do okay in Baltimore. They don't really spread out too much from there, though. You see one echo of college football popularity. Louisville, Kentucky, thanks to Lamar Jackson. That's where he played in college. The Bills are very well liked in Buffalo and across upstate New York, even a little bit into Ontario. You also see some interest all the way over in Wyoming, where Josh Allen played in college. The Panthers are the most popular team in North Carolina, though not with particularly high market share. They don't extend much into South Carolina, however. The Bears have a good bit of presence in Chicago, and they do extend outwardly into other states, not nearly to the extent as baseball's Chicago Cubs. The Bengals have some market share in Cincinnati. They don't extend too much out from there, though. The Browns are more popular across most of Ohio, including majority share in Cleveland. They also have some market share in Oklahoma, thanks to Baker Mayfield. The Cowboys have the highest appeal nationally, and while they're often the default team where there's no other obvious team to be the most popular, it's usually at really low levels like you see here in Idaho, South Carolina. One thing that's not immediately apparent on the map is that Dak Prescott has increased a lot of interest in the Cowboys in Mississippi. If you look at Google Trends data before and after his debut, you see a pretty clear uptick. The Broncos are fairly popular in Colorado, and they extend into Wyoming and the Mountain West generally. As is typical for Detroit teams, the Lions have Michigan really locked down and not much appeal outside the state. Similarly, Wisconsin is very loyal to its teams. The Packers are no exception. Packers do have some broader national appeal outside the state. The Texans are the most popular team in Houston, but their reach doesn't extend too much outside of there, as the Cowboys are much more popular throughout Texas. The Colts are popular in Indiana, not much else outside the state. The Jaguars have some interest in Jacksonville, and a little bit out into other parts of northern Florida, but not very much territory. As stated earlier, the Chiefs at 65% in Kansas City have the highest market share anywhere. They've got some appeal in western Missouri and Kansas. They also have 9% at Lubbock, Texas, where Patrick Mahomes played college football. The Chargers have not yet established much of a market share in Los Angeles. They still actually have some popularity in San Diego, where they moved from. The Rams are starting to get a foothold in Southern California, and they still actually have a little bit of interest left in St. Louis. Even before they moved from Oakland to Las Vegas, the Raiders were pretty popular across the West Coast. They weren't localized just to Oakland, and they remain that way. Miami teams tend to have a pretty tough time establishing interest in their own market. The Dolphins are no exception, but unlike baseball's Miami Marlins, the Dolphins do have some reach across all of Florida. The Vikings have supremacy across the state of Minnesota and on westward into the Dakotas and even a little into Montana. The Patriots are extremely popular in Boston and New England generally, and they're a default popular enough team to show up on the map all over the country. The Saints are loved in New Orleans and very popular throughout Louisiana and Mississippi. Interestingly, you see them showing up here in Salt Lake City and Idaho. I'm going to attribute that to Taysom Hill. The Giants are popular in New York City and New York and the Northeast generally, but since they share with the Jets, their numbers just aren't that high. The Jets cover much of the same territory as the Giants, just with somewhat lower numbers. The Eagles are loved in Philadelphia and eastern Pennsylvania generally. They've got some appeal all up and down the East Coast, and also, thanks to Carson Wentz, some interest in North Dakota. Now that Wentz doesn't play for them anymore, this will probably go away. The Steelers are very popular in Pittsburgh, western Pennsylvania generally, and they have enough of a national appeal. They show up in this map a lot in the eastern and western U.S. The Seahawks are very popular in the Pacific Northwest area, and that even extends into British Columbia. The 49ers are the most popular team in Northern California, have a lot of interest throughout the entire western U.S. Like most Florida teams, the Buccaneers have pretty poor market share, both in their home region across Florida and then very little outside of Florida. The Titans have some appeal in the state of Tennessee, but not very much outside of it. And finally, the Washington football team is the most popular team in DC and Virginia, though the numbers really aren't that high. Finally, I also wanted to talk about the teams from the Canadian Football League, since I've shown them on the same map. The CFL has 9 teams throughout Canada, and before the pandemic, the average CFL attendance was in the low 20,000 range, compared to the NFL's high 60,000s. So it's no surprise the CFL teams overall don't show up much on the map. No CFL team is even at 1% anywhere in the US, and the CFL teams generally don't have much appeal outside their home province. Now, you might argue that this isn't fair because the CFL didn't play in 2020 due to the pandemic, but the NFL did. So, of course, the NFL has higher numbers. That's a valid point, but the impact is going to be pretty small since it's only one of 3 years, and Canadians were still Googling about the CFL during 2020. Without the pandemic, the CFL teams might be a percent or two higher in their home provinces. So I'll go from west to east on this map. Starting in British Columbia, the BC Lions, who play in Vancouver, are only at 7%. They're a good bit less popular than the Seattle Seahawks in British Columbia. Alberta has two teams, the newly renamed Edmonton Elks and the Calgary Stampeders. They are the two most popular teams in the province, collectively accounting for 17% of the NFL and CFL interest there. Saskatchewan is the first example of a CFL team being clearly the most popular in its province, with the Rough Riders at 32% compared to the highest NFL team at only 7%. Similarly, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are at 34% in Manitoba, which is much higher than any NFL team. I will take this chance to point out that British Columbia and Alberta have much higher populations than Saskatchewan and Manitoba, so the apparent gap in the size of their fan bases may not be that big. The Eastern CFL teams don't fare nearly as well. In Ontario, you only see NFL teams even showing up on this map. The Hamilton Tiger Cats are down there at 3%, and the Ottawa Red Blacks and Toronto Argonauts all the way down at just 1%. Although it is important to remember that Ontario is much bigger than any of those western provinces. The most popular team in Quebec is the New England Patriots, although the Montreal Alouettes are there in second place at 8%. And finally, there's not very much CFL interest in any of the Atlantic provinces. That would be Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, as the New England Patriots are the most popular team in all of those. So that's the map, 32 NFL teams and 9 CFL teams. I've linked to the Tableau workbook in the description if you want to click around and see what you find. You can also download it directly there. Be sure to share any surprising or interesting findings in the comments, and if you want more videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. This is Harry, and thanks for watching.